The 2025 Industrial Stormwater General Permit was released back in January, and with it came several new training requirements. In this video, we're going to go over those training requirements and dive into the permit itself to show you line for line where those requirements exist. We're also going to talk a little bit about some compliance strategies and some common questions that have come up regarding these scenarios. So let's go ahead and get into it. There are two new SWIP training requirements in this new permit. The first one is now permittees will have to include trainings for contractors and vendors that come on their site. And they also have new training timelines, giving either 30 or 90 days to train certain employees as well as their contractors and vendors. The new training requirements for contractors and vendors is for contractors and vendors who have potential to impact water quality and duties in industrial areas. Permittees can choose not to train these contractors and vendors and instead supervise them while they're working on their site. The new training timeline requirements for your SWIP trainings look something like this. You have 90 days from hire date to train permanent employees as well as contractors and vendors, and 30 days from your hire date for temporary employees, part-time employees, contractors, and vendors. Just a reminder, you also need to keep a log of when these trainings take place and keep that with the SWIP. So let's open up the permit and read these training requirements word for word. So here we have employee training. The SWIP shall include B&Ps to provide SWIP training for all employees and contractors and vendors who perform duties that have the potential to impact stormwater quality in areas of industrial activities subject to this permit. Contractors and vendors may be excluded if the permittee has an employee who has been trained on the SWIP supervising the activities at all times. It then goes into what the training plan should include. It says at minimum, the training plan shall include the content of the training, how the permittee will conduct the training, the frequency and schedule of the training, a log of the dates in which specific employees receive the training. That log must be kept with the SWIP and made available upon request. And it says for trainings performed electronically through centralized training system, permittee shall log all electronically performed trainings and generate a summary report of the trainings by placing it with the SWIP on an as-needed basis. So let's go into what needs to be in this training. So for the content of the training, you must have an overview of what's in the SWIP, who's responsible for maintaining the SWIP, and its location on site. That content also needs to include how employees make a difference in complying with the SWIP, preventing contamination of stormwater, and their roles in ensuring B&Ps are being properly maintained and in place. Content also should include spill response procedures, good housekeeping, maintenance requirements, and material management practices. As far as the frequency and schedule goes, the permittee shall train all employees annually at minimum. All employees, contractors, and vendors who have duties in areas of industrial activity must be trained within 90 days of hire. Part-time and seasonal employees, contractors, and vendors must be trained within 30 days of hire. So just to reiterate the major changes here, we now not only have to train our employees, but also contractors and vendors who have duties that have the potential to impact stormwater quality in areas of industrial activity subject to the permit. And we have the option to supervise those activities at all time by an employee who has been trained on the SWIP. As far as our training timeline goes, again, new things here are we have 90 days to train employees, contractors, and vendors who are permanent full-time, and we have 30 days to train part-time and seasonal employees, contractors, and vendors. So that's the bulk of the new training requirements in the 2025 permit. I want to now transition into some common questions regarding these training requirements. Before I do, I want to promote our Q&A sheet. We've combined all the questions that we've gotten through discussion sessions or emailed to us. We passed those along to Ecology and got responses to over 60 questions in this document. So I encourage you to go visit our website and review this document. We'll go over some of the common ones that have come up regarding training. So let's go ahead and dive into these questions. I'm going to read word for word what Ecology's response was to these questions. Some of these do get quite long, so I'll do my best to clarify at the end when necessary. So question 1, does the timeline to start training vendors start in Q1 or after the SWIP update deadline of July 1st? And Ecology's answer here is as long as they're trained within the 30 or 90-day deadlines, if they believe their SWIP updates will be done within that 30-day or 90-day training deadline, they can wait until the SWIP is updated and train them under the new SWIP as long as it falls under the training deadlines for part and full time. So an example, a contractor comes to the site who's been performing work full time. They have 90 days to be trained. The SWIP update should occur within 30 days. The contractor's training would occur under the new SWIP since it falls within the deadlines. The permit gives 30 or 90 days depending on full or part-time status. So basically what this is saying is that timeline starts right now. It starts in Q1. However, if you're updating your SWIP and you have a vendor that comes in and your SWIP's going to be updated in a week or two and you have 30 or 90 days to train that vendor, you can wait until that SWIP is updated so that those people are trained under your most up-to-date SWIP. Question 2, can you clarify what constitutes a vendor that has the ability to impact stormwater quality in areas of industrial activity? Does this include folks like the FedEx or UPS drivers, vending machine suppliers, etc.? The answer here is FedEx, UPS, and mail delivery services are couriers, not contractors and vendors. The expression have the ability to impact stormwater quality requires the permittee to apply judgment about the nature of work that the contractor and vendor will be providing. Factors to consider include, is the work inside or outside? If outside, could their materials or activities allow pollutants to contaminate stormwater runoff? An example, a contractor performing outdoor concrete cutting or lawn care and landscape contractor are examples of vendor or contractors who have the ability to impact stormwater quality and will require training. So the next few questions are just asking for examples of who would and wouldn't require training. So this one is, would a truck driver in and out of a site require training? Ecology's answer, truck drivers in and out of an ISGP facility may perform duties that have the potential to impact stormwater quality. For example, loading or unloading materials, fueling, or other vehicle maintenance, and be required to be trained if they're employee, vendor, or contractor. Many truck drivers in and out of an ISGP facility may not meet the criteria for training if they are not an employee, vendor, or contractor. For example, FedEx drivers and other couriers do not meet this criteria. So this is basically saying it depends, but truck drivers who are a vendor or contractor and have that potential to impact stormwater quality would need to be trained. So question 4, would landscapers require training? This question stems from concern of vendors who provide weekly services, often off hours, without consistent schedules. The answer is landscapers, such as those mowing on a weekly basis, would need training unless supervised. Even if they're a rotating crew of different individuals conducting activity, upon entrance to the facility, the permittee must provide sufficient written or verbal direction about how to prevent pollution related to their contracted activities. So again, this is saying that yes, your landscapers would need training. Again, that's assuming that you're not supervising them and that they're working in an area of industrial activity. Question 5, would a vendor or contractor performing chemical or fuel deliveries need training? Yes, they would need training unless supervised by a site employee. Continuing on, question 6, is it up to the company's discretion of activities that will impact stormwater? The answer here is yes. The permittees may use their judgment on what activities may impact stormwater. This language is also described throughout the permit of impacts to stormwater quality. Question 7, what sort of training is appropriate to satisfy the training requirement for vendors and contractors? The answer here, whatever the site is currently doing for SWIP training, just make sure the SWIP template is up to date with current site activities and follows the requirements of the permit. Ecology does not have specific advice for how to train or what's appropriate. Permittees know their sites and activities best. Permittees can choose how much to train the vendors and contractors on the SWIP as long as it falls under the 3 requirements in the SWIP training noted in S3B5. Permittees can tailor the training to focus on the activities conducted in areas where the vendor and contractor will work. We encourage the Washington Stormwater Center and other guidance providers to develop training modules for ISGP facilities to use. For brand new permittees, they can train on the SWIP requirements in the permit itself to ensure people know what's required, or use other training opportunities within Washington State. So what this is saying is that training can be the exact same training that you give to your employees. It really just needs to cover the 3 requirements in the SWIP training noted in S3B5. So again, that can be tailored specifically to vendors and contractors or be the same training that you provide to your employees. Question 8, can you train an individual from the contractor or vendor's company to supervise the activity? The answer here is no. The permit says it needs to be an employee of the facility. So this means that you can't, if you have a landscaping crew coming on site, you can't just train the lead landscaper and say, hey, make sure your employees don't do anything to mess up our stormwater. Either all of those individuals on your site need training, or you need to have an employee of your facility to supervise. Question 9, when you supervise a vendor activity, do you need to log that in the training log? The answer here is no, you only log individuals who receive or need training in the training log, and that supervised activities don't need to be logged, only the trainings. Question 10, if a trained staff member is supervising the activity, what are the expectations from ecology inspectors to prove that that has occurred? So the answer here is the trained person's signature in the SWIP's training log is a legally binding agreement stating that they took the training, understand it, and are responsible for implementation of the SWIP on site. Ecology reviews the SWIPs and the training logs during inspections. While the permit requires a trained staff member to supervise an untrained vendor or contractor, the permit does not require specific documentation of the trained staff member overseeing the work of an untrained vendor or contractor. So this is saying there's really nothing that you need to prove that you have supervised this activity. I would recommend still having some documentation of that in case that becomes a question. And it also mentions that you have to prove that the person that's supervising was trained, and you do that through the training log. So question 11, what does the training for folks supervising the activity of all times include? Does it need to be specific to the vendor activity they're supervising, or is their normal training acceptable? The normal training is acceptable. The permit only has general requirements. Remember the 3 requirements we talked about for training. Giving permittees flexibility in how they will fulfill the requirements. Question 12, do the individuals who are supervising the activity at all times need to be identified as part of the pollution prevention team? The answer here is yes. These individuals or the titles of position should be listed in the SWIP as part of the pollution prevention team. The ISGP language states, the SWIP shall identify specific individuals by name or by title within the organization, the pollution prevention team, whose responsibility include SWIP development, implementation, maintenance, and modification. So hopefully that gives a little more clarity on some of these new vendor and contractor training requirements, as well as the timelines to have your employees and vendors and contractors trained. We're going to continue on with this series. We're going to continue to dive through the permit and go line by line and look at all the changes. So I hope you'll stick with us, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss a future video, and I'll see you next time.